I want you to think for a second about the people we let into our homes to take care of our children. We check references, we check smiles, we check how the kids react to them in the first few minutes. We almost never check whether they can be in two places at once. The mother in this story did everything right. She was careful, she was thorough, she loved her children more than anything in the world. And she still ended up standing in a hospital hallway, watching doctors tell her that medicine couldn't explain what was happening to her son, because the real explanation was sitting under her own living room sofa in a small yellow box. Her name is Lena. This is her story, and I need to warn you, it doesn't end the way you want it to. Let's get into it. Lena was a mother of 3, a son and 2 daughters. And for most of her married life, her husband worked in another city, which meant the family only saw him occasionally in short visits that never felt like enough. She was, in every practical sense, raising 3 children largely on her own. As her children grew, so did their needs, and the money her husband sent home each month stopped stretching far enough to cover everything. Their rental house was small, cramped for a family of 4, soon to be 5, in spirit if not in headcount, once the demands of growing kids started to pile up. So she and her husband made a decision that felt, at the time, like the responsible thing to do. They took out a loan from the bank and bought a house. It worked. The new house was bigger, nicer, everything they'd hoped for. Each child finally had their own space. 1 room for her son, 1 shared room for her 2 daughters, 1 for herself and her husband when he was home, and 1 spare room set aside for guests. But that loan came with a cost beyond the obvious one. Between the mortgage and everyday expenses, the family was, in her words, officially broke. So Lena decided to go back to work herself to help her husband keep up with everything. She found a position that ran from early morning until sunset. A long day, a full day, the kind of schedule that leaves almost nothing left over for parenting once you factor in the commute and the exhaustion. Within a month, she said, her sorrows had become heavier than she was. She couldn't manage childcare and full-time work alone. She needed help. She decided to hire a nanny. This is where things started, in hindsight, to feel less like ordinary bad luck and more like something steering her toward a very specific outcome. She called every agency she knew. She searched online. Nothing worked out. Candidates didn't match what she needed, or agencies tried to scam her outright, sending people with fabricated credentials or simply taking a fee and disappearing. Week after week, nothing. She said, looking back, that maybe all of that failure was a sign, a kind of resistance she didn't understand at the time, something trying to steer her away from what was coming. She didn't understand it then. She only understood it later, after everything that happened. One day, she mentioned her frustration to a coworker. Another woman overheard the conversation and spoke up. She had a nanny at home, she said. African, wonderful with children, and she'd kept her for years without a single complaint. Lena asked where she'd found her. An agency, the coworker said, had sent the nanny to her directly. Lena took down the agency's information and placed her own order that same day, laying out exactly what she needed. 2 weeks later, the agency sent someone. Lena remembers being genuinely impressed by how quickly it happened after months of getting nowhere with everyone else. The nanny's name was AC. She was African, a bit thin, and she smiled constantly. A warmth that Lena appreciated at first, exactly the kind of gentle presence you'd want around your children. Though, Lena admitted later, there were moments when the smiling felt like too much, a little too constant, a little too unbroken, even in situations that didn't call for it. But she brushed that off as simply AC's nature, friendly, easygoing. AC came in on a weekend while Lena was home, which gave Lena the chance to walk her through the household routines and expectations directly. Her children were on their summer break at the time, 3 months off from school, so childcare during the day was going to matter more than ever. Lena set one condition that felt, at the time, like a small and reasonable precaution. When the children woke up, AZ was to keep them in the living room, where Lena had installed a camera so that Lena could check in on them remotely throughout the day from her office. For a while, nothing seemed wrong at all. Then, One day at work, Lena opened her phone to check the camera feed and found it wasn't working. An error message. A technical problem she had no way to diagnose remotely and no money to immediately fix. The replacement camera was expensive, and she needed to wait until the end of the month, until her paycheck came in, before she could afford a new one. She called her son to check in directly instead. He told her everything was fine. AC was taking care of them, taking care of the house, nothing to worry about. That same day, Lena left work early, specifically to check on the broken camera in person. When she got home, she found herself, almost involuntarily, trying to observe the situation quietly before announcing her presence, listening at the door, trying to get an honest read on the household before anyone knew she was there. She heard her children laughing, genuine, happy laughter. It felt, in that moment, like confirmation that she'd made the right choice hiring AC. There was something else she noticed and appreciated, too. Every time she arrived home, AZ would quietly retreat to her own room, giving Lena space to be alone with her children without hovering. It read, at the time, as thoughtfulness. Respect for boundaries. She checked the camera again while she was home, still broken. That night, while Lena was asleep, her son came into her room, visibly frightened, sweating. She sat up immediately, pulled him close, and tried to get him to explain what was wrong. He told her, as clearly as a scared child can manage, to fire AZ, to hire someone else, anyone else. She asked him why. He said that AC had come into his room, gotten down on her knees beside his bed, taken hold of his arms, and begun speaking to him, a kind of speech he couldn't understand, in words that didn't match any language he recognized. Now, Lena knew her son had recently been watching horror videos before bed, the kind of content that gives a 10-year-old's imagination plenty of raw material to work with in the dark. So her first instinct, understandably, was to assume this was simply his imagination running ahead of him, shaped by whatever he'd been watching. She comforted him, told him AZ loved them, that she'd probably just come in to check on him, nothing more sinister than that. He seemed to accept it. She sent him back to his room. But after he left, lying awake in the dark, she found herself asking a harder question. If it really was just his imagination, why was he the only one complaining? Her daughters, by every appearance, adored AZ completely. Why would fear only take root in one child and not the others? She told herself, again, that it was the horror videos she needed badly for that explanation to be the true one. Sometime later, Lena came home from work to find her daughters in the living room, crying, visibly terrified. She rushed to them and asked what had happened. They told her they'd called out for Assie and gotten no response, so they'd gone to the kitchen themselves to make a sandwich. While they were in there, they heard something moving inside the kitchen bin, a scraping, shifting sound that made them think, reasonably, of a mouse. They opened the lid to check. Inside, they found Assie's head. Just her head. Looking back up at them, smiling, they ran, screaming, back to the living room. And then AC appeared, walking out from the kitchen, completely intact, carrying the sandwich they'd been trying to make, as though absolutely nothing had happened. She handed it to them and returned to the kitchen, as though this was simply an ordinary afternoon. Lena called for her immediately. AC emerged not from the kitchen this time, but from her own bedroom, asking calmly if Lena needed something. Lena, shaken, asked her to fetch something from her bedroom, a request invented on the spot purely so she wouldn't have to explain in front of AC what her daughters had just described. She didn't know in that moment whether to trust her own daughters or her own eyes. She had just watched, with her own vision, AC walk out of her bedroom door. And yet her daughters swore, independently and in a state of genuine terror, that they had just seen AC's severed head sitting in the kitchen bin, and AC herself emerging from the kitchen only moments later. How could the same woman be in her bedroom and the kitchen at the same time? Lena comforted her daughters as best she could. And then she did the thing she would come to regret more than almost anything else in this entire story. She let it go. She said since, if there's one thing she could tell every parent watching this, it's this: believe your children, please, whatever it costs you to take their fear seriously. It costs less than what she paid for ignoring it. Not long after, Lena woke in the middle of the night to screaming from her daughter's room. She ran in and found her youngest crying, curled down on her knees on the floor, inconsolable. She asked what was wrong. Her daughter said Azzy had been standing at the door, staring in at her, smiling, unmoving, for what felt like a very long time. Lena went straight to the door and looked. Nobody was there. She checked with the other daughter who'd been in the same room the entire time. She'd seen nothing at all. Lena comforted her frightened daughter as best she could and returned to her own room, telling herself again that this was ordinary childhood fear, a nightmare, an overactive imagination running loose in an unfamiliar house. She admits now that this was, in her own words, stupid of her. She finally called her husband and told him everything: the camera, her son's warning, the head in the bin, the face in the doorway. He told her from the distance of another city not to worry. Children's imaginations, he said. Nothing more. But then, on one of his rare weekend visits home, after he'd already left again to return to work, Lena was lying in their bed and felt a hand press against her cheek. Heavy, far too large and heavy to be an ordinary hand. Her first instinct, half asleep, was that it was her husband. Then she remembered. He'd already left. She looked around the room. It was empty. The door was closed. There was no explanation for what she'd just felt. She tried hard to convince herself it was simply longing, missing her husband, her mind manufacturing the sensation of his touch out of nothing but grief and loneliness. She needed a reason to believe that, even one that didn't hold up under any real scrutiny. Her husband, when she told him, suggested she keep a closer eye on Aussie. But Lena found herself too hesitant, too uncertain, too, in her own words, shy to actually confront her or search her room directly. It's a strange thing to admit, looking back. That, in her own home, with her own children's safety in question, she felt too embarrassed to simply ask. From that point on, she began checking on her children's rooms every 3 hours through the night, unable to fully rest. One of those nightly checks brought her to her daughter's room around 4 in the morning. As she approached, she heard talking coming from inside, her daughter's voices, awake at an hour that made her furious before she'd even opened the door. She was fully prepared to scold them for staying up so late. She opened the door. As she did, one of their dolls dropped to the floor. Not fell, dropped, the way something falls when whatever was holding it simply lets go the instant it's caught. Her daughters were fast asleep, both of them. The room around them, though, was in disarray, messy in a way Lena knew with absolute certainty her daughters had not caused themselves. Some of the dolls were broken. She stood there in the doorway for a long moment, then quietly closed the door and went back to her own room, unable to stop turning the scene over in her mind. The next day, she decided to take a day off work. She told Azzy she wanted to help clean the house together. A simple, harmless offer on its surface, but really an excuse. Lena wanted the chance to look around to see if there was anything in the house that might explain what had been happening. While cleaning the living room, reaching underneath the sofa, her hand found a small yellow box. She pulled it out and opened it. Inside was a black sand-like substance, and the smell that came off it hit her immediately. Sharp, wrong, powerful enough that she nearly became physically sick on the spot. She confronted Aussie with it. Aussie's reaction was immediate and furious. She screamed at Lena that this box, this substance, was the only thing keeping her and Lena's children safe. Her tone wasn't defensive in the way you'd expect from someone caught hiding something shameful. It was cold, certain, almost detached, as though Lena had just threatened something far larger than a simple household secret. That coldness, the complete absence of guilt or embarrassment, is what finally pushed Lena past her hesitation, past her shyness, past every instinct that had kept her quiet up to that point. And that's the exact moment she heard her son start screaming. She ran to him and found him in a state she still struggles to fully describe. Foam at his mouth, his eyes twisted in a way that didn't look physically possible. She had never, in 10 years of raising him, seen anything remotely like it. And in that moment, every parental instinct she had simply short-circuited. She screamed. She remembered from somewhere some old piece of advice, some half-remembered warning, that if you see someone in this kind of state, you're supposed to get them into cold water immediately. She tried to lift him, to carry him toward water. He was too heavy to move. A 10-year-old boy suddenly weighing, by her own description, something closer to 100 kilograms, an impossible weight for a child that size, immovable in a way that defied every physical explanation she had. She called emergency services. They took him. She called her husband, who began making his way home immediately. At the hospital, the doctors told her plainly that something was wrong with her son that they could not explain medically. They told her, carefully, that this might be a situation requiring a spiritual response rather than a purely medical one. She said she still can't fully describe what she saw in that hospital room. Her son simply staring at the ceiling. No movement, no blinking, no blinking, no blinking, nothing. At some point, she went home, needing to check on the house, needing to find AZ and confront her directly with everything that had just happened. AZ was gone. Lena called the agency immediately to warn them, to demand answers. The agency told her something that made the entire situation collapse into something even stranger than what she'd already lived through. Her original request was still listed as in process. According to their records, they had never sent her a nanny at all. She went to AZ's room. The door had been closed the entire time she and her children had lived in that house with her. When she finally opened it, she found it filthy, dust, disuse, the unmistakable signs of a room nobody had actually been living in, despite the fact that a woman had slept there, eaten there, worked in that house every single day for months. If AC had never truly been there, if the agency had no record of ever sending her, if her room showed no sign anyone had lived in it, then the question Lena was left with was almost impossible to hold in her mind at all. What, exactly, had been living in her house with her children? Lena eventually sought out a churchman for guidance, desperate for some kind of explanation, some kind of path forward for her son. What he told her has stayed with her every day since. The reason this had happened to her son, he said, traced back to the moment she opened that yellow box. She still blames herself for it. Not for hiring Assie, she said, more than once, that she believes now she never truly had a choice in the matter, that everything about the search, the delays, the sudden and unusually fast placement was steering her toward exactly this outcome from the very beginning. But the box, opening it, confronting what was inside, that decision she carries entirely on her own shoulders. She still doesn't fully know what AZ was. Not human, clearly. Not an ordinary spirit either, if the churchman's explanation is to be believed. Something that needed that yellow box and whatever protection it provided, kept intact and undisturbed for reasons Lena was never given the chance to fully understand before everything fell apart. That's her story, exactly as she's told it. What do you think about it? If this one got under your skin, the idea of a camera that conveniently stops working right when you need it most sent a chill through you. Let me know in the comments. I read every single one, and I especially want to hear what you think that yellow box actually was. If you want more stories like this, subscribe and turn on notifications, because there are more nannies, more locked rooms, and more things wearing familiar faces coming soon on this channel. And if there's one thing worth taking from Lena's story, let it be this. If your child tells you they're afraid of someone in your home, believe them every time.